When you were on the bench, knowing as much as you did about advocacy, you were no doubt able to spot the flaws and the holes in the way advocates presented themselves to you.
Yes, but you keep your mouth shut. Because you can't say you can't succeed because you prejudge. And you can't say to someone you've got a terrific flaw and the other opponent hasn't really seen it as forcefully as you have. And I learnt to be absolutely silent. The trouble was, though, if you had a nice lunch, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you'd want to stretch and you're terribly bored, and I used to get up and walk to the other end of the court. Gee, you used to put the poor advocates off. They thought something was wrong, so I stopped doing it.
Even if your feet did go to sleep.
Exactly.
That is difficult. I have spoken to judges as well, and I'm always interested to know, in the court of human emotion, if you like, the ability to keep an impassive expression, especially when you're used to being expressive. Yeah, with your expressive voice, no less.
Well, that's true, but by and large you had to force yourself to stick out of it. Sometimes you'd come in, but more importantly, when you went on a country circuit doing criminal matters, and there were a myriad of what they called other matters apart from the trials, you wouldn't influence the trials, but when you'd call this through, and a man would be, as we used to call it in DUI, as PCA now, drive under the influence, and you'd see that he had a licence and he had a job from the short facts. So you'd say straight away to the advocate appearing, "Oh, I take it it's the suspension of the licence, not the fine that's worrying you," Mr. Twigg. "Oh, yes, Your Honour," as if to say, "How did you know?" "I've been there before." So to that extent, that's interfering. But it cut the list through because they'd plead and you'd give them a bit of leniency. After you'd seen that it was appropriate and the prosecutor knew what you were doing, he'd stop you if you were going too far. But in that way, the court focused and did well what it had to do in quick time.
Have you thought sometimes about the need, if you like, for continuing your services in such a way that perhaps you can advise, for example, law shows or crime shows on television, areas where we still have a need to learn about all the sorts of qualities that you've brought to the practice of law over the years in such a way that they don't get lost completely as the law evolves and changes over the years, particularly when it comes to, if you like, dealing with juries too. You would have had so much...
would teach them that sort of thing. But I also now help with U3A, you know, the University of the Third Age. And I started off by talking about the law to them, and they said, "Oh, that's nice, very nice." So I suddenly thought, I know what I'll do. I'll get the facts from criminal and civil cases I've done, change all the names and a bit of the facts, and let them be the juries. They think it's marvellous. They swamp me, ask me all sorts of questions. They debate with me. And I find on examination that very few of them have actually served on juries. Yet they warm to this method of being part of the law. They think it's wonderful. And now the buggers have got me going about 14 times this coming term.
When I interviewed Ian Barker QC last year, he was mourning what he sees as the gradual erosion of the jury system. He said it's one of the last expressions of a participatory democracy that is exercised here in Australia, and he is very concerned at the move towards judge-only trials.
But I wonder why he says it. You see, it was a Liberal government who did away with juries, and that under the influence of insurance companies, that is, in civil cases. That's sad, but a lot of people said, well, what does it matter? You get quicker justice. But that was an erosion of the jury system. The important thing is there is no eroding of it in crime, and that's sufficient for me. A judge can do as well in a motor accident case as a jury of 4. Or a defamation case. Some of the older advocates, like Tom Hughes and the like, thought, and that monocled judge we were talking of, they held the view that advocacy was all important because they were good at it. And advocacy by way of juries, they were terrific at addressing juries at the end of a case. And it was lovely to watch. But a lot of it was acting. And you get the same result without that need. Judges were just there to conduct the court according to the rules and not make a judgment. But I think it's improved. We still have juries in criminal matters, and I hope we never do without them. But in civil cases that have been gone for years, who cares? Justice is being done. and sometimes better, because you get an erudite judge who knows what you're talking about. He gets to the point very quickly, whereas with a jury you've got to go through all the detail.
Don't you feel aggravation, though, when you hear broadcasters like Alan Jones, for example, trumpeting about how terrible trials are being conducted these days, or the way the criminal justice system works and people getting off too easy, the baying, if you like, for less lenient sentences. Do you think if people knew more about the way the jury system actually works in criminal trials, for example, that they would necessarily think that way?
No, I don't. Alan Jones has got to hear his own voice. He's paid to talk, so he takes subjects where he can make a point, and that's the secret of that. But if you get down to grassroots, there is no one advocating doing away with juries in criminal cases. We don't mind them disappearing in others, but Alan just, I think, goes too far because he's got listeners and he's got to spark up. He's got a storm and teacup approach.
There's a program that's about to commence on SBS Australia on Trial on Thursday night. Will you be watching that? That's about some of the interesting cases in the 19th century. I know the first one's kicking off with a servant girl who was the target of a group rape.
Don't you think, though, that we have too much of law? Take the American cases. We have a lot of that, and it becomes very stereotyped after a while.
And inaccurate?
Oh, inaccurate, and they don't... they talk about bargaining and cases collapse. That's more for the theatre of it, and that's not law. It has its own theatre. They don't think so. And you notice it's Americans who do this. The English don't at all in television.
They have a distaste for it, that's why.
Well, that's right, yes. So I think that's sad, but I take no notice of it.